Hey there, friends, and welcome back to the Legal Paige podcast. In this episode, we'll be discussing the fascinating triangular relationship between your business contracts, business insurance, and business structure. So when it comes to running a successful business, especially as solopreneurs, there are many different legal aspects to consider, and I know it can be certainly overwhelming. But please don't worry because I've got you covered. In this episode, I am going to first look at your business's contracts and how they can help define the terms and conditions of your business's relationships with your clients and customers to ensure everyone is on the same page, especially when a legal dispute occurs. And then we're going to discuss the importance of insurance and how that is kind of the second line of protection in the triangular relationship, in terms of how it protects your business in the event of unforeseen circumstances or a negligent situation comes about. And then we'll discuss the crucial role that business structure plays in all of this in limiting liability and protecting your personal assets. Finally, of course, I am going to explain how all three of these things work together when a legal issue pops up, and the various lines of defense that these create to protect you and your business. So whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or you're just starting out, this episode is a must listen and one I've wanted to record for quite some time. So let's just get to it and dive into the fascinating world of contracts, insurance, and business structure and how they all work together. You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about in this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. Please seek out another attorney in your city and home state if you need specific legal advice related to your unique business. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, so protecting your business is important. We all know that. But there are several ways to do it, and I want to tell you as a business owner, honestly, what you really need. And here's the thing. You need the business triangle. You need contracts, you need insurance, and you need the right business structure for your business, because all of those points of the triangle work together when a legal issue pops up. So while you can't prevent altogether legal issues from arising, we try to get you 80 to 90% of the way there. You should know right off the bat, no business is fully protected. The biggest corporations with tons of in-house counsel still get sued, and probably get sued more than just you as a small business. But what I really want to explain here in this episode is the three main lines of protection with your business and how each interact with one another to protect your assets and your business if the worst does happen. So let's start out with the first point of the triangle that I talk about all the time as a contract attorney, contracts. So a contract for your business protects you from the unforeseeable risk and liability if you're working directly with a client as a service provider. And I know that's many of you listening to this podcast. So business owners should always get contracts in place before taking on clients. The contract needs to include, of course, very specific details about the type of services you provide, fees, retainers, dates that you'll be providing the services, cancellation policies, rescheduling policies, so on and so forth, deliverables. And then essentially the contract should cover every part of your business's services and also what happens if, say, a dispute arises. Anything that is not written in the contract is left unprotected. That's important to remember. For example, if the client is verbally informed that there's a 14-day cancellation fee, but then it's not in the contract, they likely will not have to pay for it, especially if you have an entire agreement clause that says, even if we agreed to something outside of this contract, whatever we have now agreed to is bound within the four corners of this contract. And so any extraneous conversations we had are no longer what we have settled upon. So it is an absolute must to put in every little detail into your service contract so that there's no misunderstanding between any of the parties, to ensure everyone is in agreement and to make sure that everybody is in agreement when you come back to the contract for dispute resolution purposes. All to say, the more detail you put into the contract gives less room for litigation when a lawsuit potentially comes up. And again, I'm going to talk about what that looks like here in a second. But remember, it's always better for you to add it into the contract than to wish you had it later. Even if you're not sure exactly the legal phrasing of how to write something into your contract, try your best, because we have the freedom to contract here in the United States and you can write in your own business policies. So instead of waiting and being like, I wish I had that in my contract, but I just don't know how to write it in and I'm not comfortable without finding an attorney, like at least just bullet point or try to phrase it in the best plain language possible and get it into your contract. It's better to have it in there than to wish that you had done that later on. And then one other thing I did want to point out here in regards to contracts is aside from contracts with your clients, because contracts also help protect you as you expand and hire on workers. So if you hire on an employee or an independent contractor, you absolutely want to make sure that you have an employee agreement in place and a contractor agreement in place. Either or, depending on the circumstance. And then also have them sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, because this legal contract is important because the parties agree not to disclose confidential information that they have shared with one another, especially when doing business together and or after they stop doing business together. For employees, an NDA is really important because they're going to learn a ton about your business and all your trade secrets. Contractors, it's also very important because they're probably working within the industry that you're already in, and you want them to keep all of the confidential information that they find out about your business just between you and them as your contracted worker. Now, I do mention all of this because I think what most business owners oftentimes miss is they think the client contracts are like lock and key, the most important things that they need to have in their business. Like that's absolutely true. But most disputes are resolved at the contract level with your clients, and the most legal disputes that end up in litigation are oftentimes between you as the business owner and your workers. So just make sure that you still have contracts for employees and contractors, and you pay close attention to those as you would your client contracts. So no matter what kind of business you're in, make sure you're using contracts, whether it's a service contract with your client, a licensing agreement with another business owner, an NDA with your workers, etc. Contracts, in sum, are essential for protecting your business. But how does this point of the 3-point triangle for your business actually work? I always say contracts are your first line of defense. This is why I tell sole proprietors who are just starting out that you absolutely have to get a client contract first. Like if you don't, you're kind of out of luck. Because when a dispute arises regarding your relationship between your company and the client, or the company and the employee, like I discussed, the first step is to carefully review the terms of the contract to see if it provides any guidance on how to handle that dispute. Many contracts will resolve the dispute just through the wording and verbiage of the contract because that's what the parties agreed upon. And then some contracts also have dispute resolution clauses that outline a specific process for resolving a dispute. If the contract is a bit unclear, or the parties are interpreting a clause differently, then you're probably going to have to resolve the dispute through this alternative dispute resolution. If there's no dispute resolution clause, or if the dispute cannot be resolved through the process outlined in the contract, and again, that's usually mediation and or arbitration, then the next step is to typically try and negotiate a settlement between the parties amongst attorneys. So the step-by-step process here is you and the party that have this dispute go to the contract language first. Try to have the contract resolve whatever the disagreement is. If everybody is interpreting things differently, they don't think the contract resolves the dispute, then you will probably have to go to alternative dispute resolution, mediation or arbitration. And if that doesn't come to a resolution, or if you have to get attorneys involved and they just want to take it to the next level, attorneys will try to find a settlement amongst them, which is why I always tell people, make sure you try to negotiate a settlement first, because 95% of the time, attorneys aren't going to go to court, or they're just going to file a claim and then resolve the dispute outside of court anyways, because it's so expensive. And why pay for attorneys on both sides, both parties hiring them to resolve it for you when you could have just tried to do that yourself to begin with? But sometimes there's no way around it. Parties aren't going to communicate. They don't like each other anymore. You have to lawyer up is what I call it. But again, you still have this settlement number 2 trying to happen after you've tried to settle it between the parties. If alternative dispute isn't happening and there's no resolution that comes to be there, then you're still in another settlement situation, probably amongst the attorneys. And then you go to litigation. And that's where, of course, you file suit and it's back and forth. And it's just not fun. So one party would file a lawsuit against the other party and the dispute would be resolved in court. This can either be through a bench trial, a judge would decide it, or through a jury trial and a jury would decide it. Oftentimes, though, we're just talking here small claims court, and so you're in front of a small claims court judge or magistrate, and they would resolve the dispute for you. It's best to have an attorney represent you, but you can do this pro se. And this is where the contract still is involved, because during the litigation process, all of the parties are going to present their case and, their side of the story. The court will take all of those facts and circumstances under consideration and will interpret the contract terms based on the evidence presented. So your contract is still vital to this litigation process. And then the court is going to consider any applicable laws and regulations that relate to the contract and or the subject matter of the dispute. This is also where sometimes insurance oftentimes kicks in. And I will discuss that here in a little bit in this episode. So just stick with me. Again, we're just talking about your contract. The contract is so important, not only from the beginning of trying to resolve it between you and the clients, but also once you get to court. Your contract is probably primary evidence number 1, and it's going to be looked at time and time and time again. All to say, it's important to note litigation and the lawsuit process is lengthy and costly. So it's really, really important to try to resolve disputes through negotiation, through settlement processes, or alternative dispute resolution methods whenever possible. And for all intensive purposes, it's also crucial to have a well-drafted contract that outlines clearly the terms and conditions of the agreement of the parties prior to working together to minimize the risk of disputes arising in the first place. Now, the last thing I did want to mention here, and some of you are like, but sometimes the contract just isn't even at play. And that's really when there's massive injury or damages that are beyond the scope of your contract. And I agree with you there. Oftentimes, 90 to 95% of the time, the dispute is in regards to some portions of the contract and the interpretation of the contract language, or the contract just isn't clear enough, or it doesn't explain enough. And now the parties are just, they're trying to do a he said, she said, they said situation. And that's where kind of litigation and courts and attorneys get involved. But if there is something in regards to injuring someone and you're involved, whether you're primarily involved or, tertiarily involved, then your contract may have limitations of liability clauses that could be at play. But oftentimes, if it's a very expensive injury, that is mainly covered solely by insurance and not by your contract. Which leads me nicely into point number 2 of the triangle, which is insurance for your business. So we talked about point number 1, and again, it's a triangle. So I want to let you know, the contract part of the triangle would be a little bit more lengthy. Think of it like an obtuse triangle. It's going to carry the majority of the weight, but insurance also carries a very significant portion of that protection triangle. Business insurance overall is a broad term which can be used to cover all kinds of different insurance policies designed to protect your business from financial loss that might occur, such as injuries to another person, like I talked about, very expensive injuries, very expensive breakages or losses of your equipment, any data loss, cybersecurity issues, wire fraud, those types of things. So every business is different, and especially online businesses are vastly different in terms of errors and omissions and the types of insurance policies that you would need for potential incidents and losses. That's why there's different insurance policies that tailor their language to what they cover to match the type of business that they're actually insuring and underwriting. And it's not uncommon to have multiple insurance policies covering your one single business. I know. There's lots of different insurance policies out there, but the main ones you really need to know about are general liability insurance. That's for negligent acts for injury or damage to property. And then there's also property equipment insurance. That's kind of the unknown situations that could occur where there's, thousands of dollars in loss to your equipment. And that's where the insurance policy would kick in. You just pay the deductible, and of course, they would cover the cost of your equipment to get repaired or replaced. Then there's cybercrime insurance. That is important for online business owners to know about, just because there's a lot of cybercrime that happens, including bank fraud, wire fraud, any type of infringement on confidential customer information, say if you're an online shop, so on and so forth. And then there's business interruption insurance. And this is important for people to remember that are solo business owners, whereby if you're the sole provider for your family, or you are a significant provider for your family, and something were to happen to you and your business were to be interrupted because you're the sole service provider of your own business, then insurance is a good thing that could kick in there to kind of cover a temporary loss in your business. Again, those are the four biggies: general liability insurance, property equipment insurance, cybercrime insurance, and business interruption insurance. Oh, and I did forget to mention auto insurance. So just be aware, and I say this a lot at conferences, events, summits, that your personal auto policy 100% has an exclusion for covering you if you are on a business trip and if you're utilizing your automobile for business purposes. That's why it's important to also get, or in lieu of your personal auto insurance, just get a commercial auto policy so that it covers you when you're using your automobile for business purposes. I always suggest that you just get a commercial auto policy because it'll cover you oftentimes for both. So the type of insurance that's right for your business will depend on all of those variety of factors that I talked about. And insurance policies are not a one size fits all. So if you go into a Facebook group and you say, I need blah, blah, blah insurance for my business, and people are regurgitating a bunch of responses on the type of insurance they have, great, that's a good starting point, but make sure that you're talking to these insurance companies or insurance brokers about your specific business, because you may not need the same policy that someone else needs, or you may need a higher policy coverage amount. So general liability insurance, which covers against injury, accidents, and claims of negligence. That is the number one absolute necessity for any business owner. And a good starting point for policy limits for this is around $1 million aggregate and $100,000 per occurrence. What this means is that you could technically have 10 different accidents of negligence in a calendar year or your policy year, and that would be covered because there's $1 million aggregate under the policy, but only $100,000 per occurrence. And the $100,000 per occurrence is really, really important. You don't want to get so low as 10,000, 15,000, 25,000, because oftentimes injuries, especially when they're negligent and you can't foresee them coming, if it is an intense injury upon a third party or another person and they sue you, I can probably guarantee it's going to be above $25,000 that they try to get from you. So up to $100,000 per occurrence is a really, really good, solid starting point where an insurance policy could kick in and settle a claim really quickly. So now you may be thinking, okay, this is all great information, but where do I get this insurance policy? There's a lot of great companies out there. You can do online shopping to kind of compare policies. You can call a representative for an insurance company in your home state. And you also have the option to just talk to an independent insurance agent who can check rates on multiple insurance companies and kind of find the best quote for you, as well as track down a policy that fits your business's needs. I always say and recommend, start with whomever you purchase your other insurance from for your personal life, whether that's State Farm, Progressive, Allstate, Geico, USAA, so on and so forth. If you're using that for like your personal automobile or your renter's insurance or your homeowner's insurance, and then ask if they provide business insurance. 9 times out of 10, they will, at least a CGL policy, commercial general liability policy. And then you can work with them on potentially they can broker out additional policies for you. It's wise to, again, just do some shopping around before you sign on to any business insurance, because you want to make sure that you're getting the coverage that you need to at a premium price that is sustainable both for you and your small business, and also a deductible price that is good for you to be able to cover in the event that you would need that insurance policy to kick in. All to say, business insurance, it's scary, it's complex. There's a lot that goes into insurance. Sometimes riskier business owners like self-insure and they try to just keep a bunch in savings, especially if you're new to business. You just don't have as many liabilities and risks as other business owners do. But I just suggest sometimes, for the $300, $400, dollars a year that it may cost, it's a really, really easy deductible amount for your business expenses every year to be covered in the event of the unknown. But what's really important to understand is how this point of the protection triangle for your business works with contracts. So if the contract doesn't solve the issue or dispute on its own, or like I said, if there's massive damage or injury to another person, that is where insurance kicks in. Or say, if your contract somewhat resolves the matter, but you're in need of your insurance covering the monetary aspect of making it right with your client, then you go to your insurance policy next and file a claim. And lastly, say you're in a legal dispute with a client and you need the insurance policy to cover the cost of litigation. That is oftentimes where insurance would kick in. And again, this is where you need to think about, okay, how much money does my business actually have in the bank? Litigation costs are vastly expensive, and we call it bleeding money in the legal world. It's outrageous how expensive court costs and attorney costs can get. So with that being said, make sure that your general liability policy does cover you for attorney costs and fees up to, say, a certain amount, and just check your policy on that. Okay, so let's get back to the 3-point protection triangle here. For example, if an event occurs that's covered by your insurance policy, you would file a claim with your insurance company. This is, of course, after if the contract does not resolve the dispute itself, or you're already in litigation, you have to hire an attorney, then you're probably not only in like a contractual dispute, but now your insurance policy, you're in an insurance dispute as well. The insurance company will then investigate the claim. They're going to read through the contract. They're going to kind of see the facts of the case and see if it's covered under the terms of the policy. This is where that massive insurance policy packet comes into play, and I've read plenty of them because I used to do insurance law. I know way too much about it. And they literally read word for word, all these attorneys do and these insurance companies, and they're going to make sure that the claim is actually falling under the insurance policy itself. And they're going to go straight to those exclusions that you find at the end of that big packet. And the insurance company is going to try to find that one of those exclusions apply. And that's where you get into an insurance dispute, and it's super annoying. Alas, I digress. If the claim is approved, which sometimes it is, the claim falls under the policy, it's approved, then the insurance company just pays out the agreed upon amount. Maybe that's what the client wanted to do to begin with. They knew that you were covered by insurance. The contract didn't really resolve the dispute. Boom, the insurance company then kicks out, say, $20,000. The client is whole again, or at least somewhat whole again. They're happy with the monetary amount that they received, and they pay that out to the client, and it will obviously just help you recover from the financial loss incurred as a result of the event. But it's important to note that insurance policy, of course, vary widely in terms of the coverage, cost, and exclusions, like I've talked about many, many times. So insurance companies will absolutely ask you for a copy of your contract with the client to determine how they plan to interpret the contract. And they will be giving that over to the attorneys involved, because the insurance company has to have its own attorney to interpret the contract on behalf of the insurance company. And they have to hire an attorney for you, because the way you interpret the insurance policy may be different than how the insurance company is interpreting their own policy. That's a whole nother tripartite relationship that I'm not going to discuss here. But again, this is why an insurance policy is key, because oftentimes they have to pay for both attorneys under that circumstance. Hence, even more of a reason altogether why your contract needs to be rock solid. It's going to be reviewed by you and the client first. It's going to be reviewed by ADR, alternative dispute resolution, and then it's going to be reviewed by your insurance company and or attorneys if it gets to, that side of a legal dispute. Okay, so the insurance is really all about the monetary payout and also the monetary coverage for litigation and attorney and expenses. That is above and beyond what your contract states. Contract, first point of the protection triangle. Insurance, next point of the protection triangle. Then our last point is all about choosing the right business structure to protect your business. And I think this is oftentimes where business owners that are just starting out, they kind of get a little bit too wrapped up in I need to file for an LLC right now, or I need to incorporate, or should I just stay a sole proprietorship? You need to think about that after you think about contracts and insurance for the reasons I just discussed. But let me just discuss here, however, for clarity's sake, I need to explain the three main types of business structures that you will probably be dealing with as a small business owner. They are a sole proprietorship, a limited liability company, and an S corporation. So these business structures are the most commonly used among smaller business owners. So if you're an established business owner, say with upwards of, 10, 20, 30 employees, honestly, these are probably not going to work for you. You're probably thinking more along the lines of corporation status. And I just want you to talk with an accountant and lawyer about those additional options. But for anyone who is listening, which is the majority of you that are solopreneurs, small business owners with only a couple of employees, you're going to really be deciding between sole proprietorship and limited liability company. So let's get into the difference between these. Business owners that are just starting out are by default a sole proprietorship. It's a business structure that does not have separate assets and liabilities from you as the owner. It's an arm and extension of yourself, of your social security number. It means you're responsible for your debts, incurred costs, and other obligations and liabilities of your business. And you can be personally liable for any issues that arise. What's really important to remember is that your business is not actually a separate entity, but rather you as the business owner are personally responsible for those liabilities and risks. Now, the second business structure is an LLC, which stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's one of the most popular business structures for small business owners, and it's an actual business entity. An LLC is the most utilized business structure because it's the simplest business entity to form, and it provides small business owners more protection for their personal assets. Side note here, if you haven't already caught on, a sole proprietorship and an S corporation are not actual business entities. They're just a type of business structure and tax status, respectively. And I'm going to get into that in a second. Now let's go back to LLCs. An LLC is formed by creating a company that acts as its own legal entity, own legal bubble, and it has its own rights outside of the owners or the members or the agents of the company. So if you own your business yourself, then all of your personal assets and liabilities and risks are over here in one bubble. And an LLC bubble is completely separate from those. It's two different bubbles that do not connect together. The LLC provides owners of the companies with quote unquote limited liability regarding business decisions, hence the name limited, such as you're not personally liable for any debts or court costs or judgments against the LLC, but you are liable for any intentional acts. That's why it's limited. So you can't intentionally do something as the business owner to harm someone else and not be expected to also be sued. Your business would be sued and you would be sued personally. However, if it's a negligent situation that occurs as you as the owner under the LLC, then only the LLC is still liable for all of the potential debts that could occur or losses that could occur within that LLC bubble. Hopefully that makes sense. Essentially, an LLC just acts as this shield. That's why I call it a bubble, or additional form of protection for owners beyond their contracts and beyond their insurance policies to protect their personal assets from business-related issues. An LLC altogether is It's easy. It's easy to form. It does require your business to truly separate from your own personal expenses, accounts, etc. in terms of you cannot commingle. So you have to have a separate business bank account. You have to have your separate employer identification number through the IRS, and then you have to register in your home state as an LLC. But all of that it's pretty easy to do yourself, DIY. And the good news is the legalpaige.com has DIY LLC registration guides for you in your specific state. So you can just go to our website and you can type in the state that you live in. And if you want to become an LLC, I'll walk you through the process, like literally handhold you through screenshots, where to put in information. And you can do it yourself. You don't need to hire an attorney. You don't need to hire LegalZoom. You don't need to hire a CPA to do this for you. It's just not worth it. You can do it yourself, I promise. Now, I did want to briefly discuss S Corps because lots of people are like, oh, I'm not a sole proprietorship. I'm not an LLC. I'm an S Corp. This may come as a bit of a shock, but an S Corp is not a business formation or entity. It's just a tax designation. So in order to be an S Corp, you actually first have to form your business as a limited liability company for legal purposes in your state. So you are an LLC that files as an S corporation. S Corps don't give any additional liability protection over the LLC. The LLC itself is the legal entity and bubble that we just talked about for shielding your personal assets and liability from the business. An S Corp is just what you file for tax purposes to save a little bit of money on that. But I'm not going to get into that in today's episode. I just wanted to briefly touch on it. So we've talked about the sole proprietorship versus LLC. How does this point of our triangle relationship of protection actually work with contracts and insurance? Your business structure is your final line of defense in a legal dispute. So your contract is interpreted first, a hopeful settlement is agreed upon, but if not, then insurance oftentimes kicks in, or if you do kind of settle things, but you're looking for, monetary resolution there, you could file an insurance claim to help you cover the costs of that resolution. And say maybe we don't even get to that point and insurance excludes coverage. There's some type of exclusion in your policy that's like, nope, we're not going to cover this. Or the lawsuit, say, doesn't end in your favor and you're in not only small claims court, but maybe you're just in your state court, like state district court, and it's a large sum of money that you have to pay. And now you owe the client or person injured a certain amount of money, and the insurance policy will only pay if it's a covered claim and will only pay up to the amount agreed upon under the insurance policy you purchased. Say you have a $50,000 limit per occurrence and the court finds you liable for $80,000. Your business is now responsible for the other $30,000. So this pans out differently for sole proprietors and LLCs. Hopefully you're kind of catching my drift here. Sole proprietors, that money can come from anywhere. It can come from your business bank account, but oftentimes that's commingled. So it's coming from your personal account, your personal savings account. Maybe you have to sell personal assets to pay for that additional $30,000. It is not good in that situation for high damages, high monetary judgments that occur for you to be liable in conjunction with your business. This is why I tell everyone for legal liability purposes to become an LLC, especially if you're someone who may only have $10,000, $15,000 max in your business bank account at any time. Because if an injury happens and for some reason your insurance policy doesn't pay that claim, I can guarantee you're not going to have enough money to pay for that claim yourself. And your LLC bubble needs to be protected from them trying to get any judgment against your personal assets. If you have an LLC, though, you likely won't have to pay the $30,000 up front. You can probably be taken to collections and do a payment plan. Or your business could file for bankruptcy, which likely isn't the case here. But again, I'm just talking about resolutions. It is the case for big sums of money. Sometimes big judgments can put a business out of business because they have to file for bankruptcy. But you personally wouldn't have to file for bankruptcy because you are separated from that LLC. Or say your business attorneys come to a resolution with the opposing party's attorneys that say, okay, the business LLC itself only has this amount that they can pay. They don't, want to go bankrupt. So let's come to a resolution on how to pay this amount to the clients to, make them whole on the $80,000 judgment. The insurance policy paid out 50. We're looking at the other 30. Can we make this happen over, say, the next 18 months? That is, in a nutshell, what would potentially happen when your LLC then becomes impacted. Also, lawsuits that have LLCs can never have the owner be personally liable unless it's an intentional act. So as long as we're just talking here about negligent acts, which is most likely the case, technically a plaintiff couldn't plead you in as another co-defendant as the owner of the business. That's because your business is in the LLC bubble. So even if they tried to, then your attorney would be like, no. This is an LLC. This is not an intentional act. Boom, you get taken out of the lawsuit personally. Sometimes they try to bring you in because maybe they know, I don't know, you as a family or as a whole unit have a bit of money and they're just trying to get a bit of money from you. But attorneys know that if it's an LLC, they can just boom, get you out of that lawsuit as long as it's not an intentional act again. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Contracts are first. Then insurance comes in for, payment purposes and covered claims. And then your business structure, particularly you as an LLC, hopefully as a small business owner, are in your own little protection bubble. And the bubble would have the contract as a small circle in the middle of it. And then around that would have the insurance policy all within your LLC bubble. I'm trying to help you visualize it here. And they all correlate to one another and interact together. But if you don't have all three, you're not really fully protected. I did want to have one big caveat here. Sometimes it doesn't make sense for business owners to become an LLC. And instead, I would tell them to just stay a sole proprietorship, but kick up that insurance policy limit. Like, I want you $2 million aggregate, $200,000 minimum per occurrence. And again, it's so fact and circumstance based, and I don't know what your business looks like, so I can't give you just like a bright line rule here. But the best example I can give is, say, a photographer who's a little bit more nomadic. They don't have a domicile. They don't stay in one specific state. It doesn't make sense for them to pay to register as an LLC in a specific state if they're going to be moving around. Sometimes military spouses that are moving around all the time have like their own little side hustle business. Oftentimes I tell them just stay a sole proprietorship, especially if they don't have a lot of liability and risk involved in their business. I just tell them kick up that insurance policy. And then you really only have 2 points of the triangle. You have the contract and you have a massive insurance policy, but you don't have the LLC business structure side of your triangle protection for your business. But the majority of business owners, you should have all 3 points of the triangle. You want to connect the triangle all together. Okay, that was a lot to take in, but I've been wanting to record this episode for a while because it's so dang important for you just to understand and conceptualize and have knowledge of how to understand these 3 lines of defense, contracts, insurance, and your business structure work together for your business. And what I want to do as we wrap up this episode is for you to look at this triangle in your own business and what points of the triangle do you need to strengthen. Take that first step to really protect your business. Is it getting an additional insurance policy? Is it looking for a commercial auto policy and not just your personal auto policy? Is it upping the coverage of your insurance policy and getting a CGL policy? Is it getting an additional errors and omissions insurance rider on top of your CGL policy because you're a sole proprietorship and you don't have that LLC business structure point of the triangle in place yet? Or is it, you know what, Paige, this whole episode made me want to become an LLC, so I'm going to do that and I'm just going to secure all of my points of a triangle together. If you need more resources on insurance or business structure, please head over to thelegalpaige.com and you can search around in our search bar for blogs and freebies to find more resources created by myself and my legal team on the various facets of insurance and different types of business structures and how they will interplay with your unique business. And of course, if you need to strengthen your contracts in your triangle and you're like, oh my gosh, I need a worker contract, I need an independent contractor agreement. What the heck is an NDA? I haven't had anyone sign that. I need to get that done. Or you're like, I need to add in a few clauses to my contract. Or you're just like, I need a brand new contract. I need to start off on the right foot. I've had one that I've utilized for a while and I've massaged it and modified it myself, but I know it's not as good as what very experienced contract attorney in the small business world can provide for me. I've got you covered. Just head over to the Legal Paige shop. That's at thelegalpaige.com as well. And you can literally search for the industry that you're in and the services you provide. I can guarantee we likely have a rock solid contract specific to your unique business needs. We have over 150 different contracts. So if we don't have one, we can get you really, really close. And you can always email my team back and forth, and we will find a contract that is going to work just for you. And finally, if you have more questions or you need more helpful business advice on this triangle relationship and protection for your business, just be sure to join the Legal Paige Facebook community, where thousands of entrepreneurs just like you are getting real-time answers about running a professional and legally legit business. All you need to do is type into the search bar of Facebook, The Legal Paige Community. It'll pop up. We'll ask you a few questions to make sure you are actually a small business owner, and then you can come join us and thousands of others. My legal team and I are in there answering questions, and I'd be happy to talk to you about, anything specific you have related to your contracts, your insurance, and your business structure working together. And that's all I have for you today. I hope you found this helpful and educational, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.